Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from NoobCoder.com, and in this tutorial I want to go over the flow layout. So we've covered the border layout, we covered the grid layout, and now we are going to cover the flow layout. So we are just going to change what's inside our set layout. So we got our content pane, and now we're going to set the layout to flow layout. So I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to make a real quick change to our basic GUI setup. I want to set this to true. So I want to be able to resize the GUI, and that will become more apparent as the tutorial goes on. So I'm going to say pane.setLayout, and instead of grid layout, we're going to say new flow layout. And now we're going to say Control-Shift-O to import the flow layout. So we have it up here. And now, if we use IntelliSense, it actually tells us what this does. So it says constructs a new flow layout, and everything's going to be centered aligned. And by default, we're going to have 5 pixels horizontal and 5 pixels vertical gap. So to actually see this, let's actually add some components. Let's add 3 J buttons for now. 1. Control-Shift-O to import J button. And let's just copy this. Change this to 2. And let's change this to 3. So let's execute this and see what we get. So right now, this is basically the flow layout. It's anchored centrally, so you can see that these 3 buttons that we created get positioned in the center. And now, if I resize my GUI, you can see that no matter how big or small I make it, it's always going to be anchored in the center. So that's a feature of the flow layout. So let's actually take a look at some of the other things we could do with the flow layout. So this is just the no argument constructor, but we could pass other arguments when we create our flow layout. So let's actually take a look at what we could pass. We could pass in the alignment. So I can say flow layout, and let's say I don't want it to be centered, and by default flow layout is centered. Let's pick one of these. I'm going to pick left. Control S to save. Let's run this. And you can see that our buttons are all anchored to the left. So if I resize this, it's always going to stay towards the left. And let's close this and let's do the right. And you can see where we're getting at here. Everything is going to be anchored to the right of the GUI. So if I resize this, doesn't matter. It's always going to stay to the right. Finally, let's take a look at some more arguments we could pass in. By default, the horizontal gap and the vertical gap is 5 pixels, but we could change this by passing in 3 arguments. So the first argument is the alignment, which we have here. Second argument is the horizontal gap, and the third is the vertical gap. So I'm going to say 30 by 30. I don't know why I chose 30, completely random. Let's actually see how it looks like. Alright, so you can see that we have a gap here of 30 pixels and a gap here of 30. So 30 horizontally and 30 vertically. So is this all that there is to the flow layout? No. And you can actually see what's happening here. You can see that all these buttons are aligned in one row. But if I resize it too much, make it too small, you can see that these buttons go to the right hand side. And that's because we have our anchored at the right hand side. So if I make this too small, you see that there's not enough room to display 3 buttons, so the third button gets anchored to the right. So let's actually add more buttons to get more of a view of what happens when you have too many buttons. So I'm going to make 20 of them. I know that's a bit excessive, but I want to prove a point. So I'm going to say pane.add. I'm going to say new j button, integer. We're going to use the I variable as the name. So we're going to say integer.toString I. And let's see what happens. So now you can see that the wraparound is pretty obvious. It says, okay, I'm going to add all these buttons anchored to the right. 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2. And then this is where our loop starts, 0, 1, 2. Then it says, hey, I don't have enough space to add it to the right. Go to the next line, and then go to the next line, go to the next line. So if I make this smaller, you should see that it resizes along with it. So that is pretty much the basics of the flow layout. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Like, comment, subscribe.